Chapter 5. General Lowe sat and puffed on his cigar, a Cuban. There was nothing like it. Of course, in the United States they were illegal, but that never stopped him from getting them. That's the way the general was. What he wanted, he got. Once more, he was in a conference room. It seemed he spent more time in meetings than he did actually working. What a world it had become. Meetings were more time-consuming than work. Of course, in this case, this was a meeting he could not miss. He did so in peril of his life. That's why he was spending Thanksgiving here instead of with his family. Oh, what of it? They cared little for his company. He also chaffed at the fact that he was not in charge of the meeting. He was a man who hungered for control. But Croesus commanded here. The conference room lights were kept low, and with good reason. While these men, they called themselves the Lucky 13, all knew each other, they were bound and determined to keep all their meetings secret. The conference room was ringed by guards, and special temporary walls had been placed around the table itself. No listening devices could pick up their voices, and the low lights were to confound any attempts at cameras photographing them. Thermographs wouldn't work either. The room was bathed in heating devices to mask the presence of the participants. That did tend to make the room a bit stuffy, but they were used to it. Well, the general wasn't, but most of the other gentlemen were used to a warmer climate. "So, General, what of this Mr. Mayhew?" Croesus said. "Why is he coming back?" Stefano sat forward in his plush leather chair and set his cigar in the ashtray. "I honestly don't know, but I'm assuming it's another pitch on his ridiculous hurricane project." A chair across the massive oval table creaked as Mr. Red leaned in. "You assume, General. We don't pay you your rather sizable salary to assume anything. You're supposed to know." Stefano ground his teeth, picked up his cigar, and took a huge drag on it. With a mighty blow, he sent a cloud of thick smoke wafting across the table. "I know about those things that are of real importance, sir. Daniel Mayhew is a loose cannon, a bird-brain, a harmless tinker of toys." A file folder slapped down on the table in front of the general. He didn't so much as flinch as he turned his head ever so slightly to look at Mr. Blue. The man was well named, as he was as cold as ice. Stefano used one finger to flip the folder open. Inside were a number of pictures. "And what do you call this little collection, General?" Blue said. Stefano flipped through the photographs. They showed Daniel engaged in some sort of work at a marina and playing with toys in his swimming pool. He snorted. "Daniel being his usual bizarre self, it's a total non-issue. If he's of no concern to us, then why is the National Science Board willing to hear his latest proposal?" Blue said. Stefano rolled his eyes. "So, okay, he submitted some preliminary specs that seemed to make sense to the gang in the engineering division. That doesn't mean a thing. He's just going to pitch another version of his hurricane cooling system. It'll go down in flames just like last time. I'll see to it." "We certainly hope so, General," Croesus said, his voice soft and calm. "The projections are for major storms in the coming years, and we would not want anything to interfere with our profits." Stefano smiled. It was not a warm smile. "I assure you, gentlemen, every storm that devastates this country will mean billions for us." He paused. He pushed the photographs away, and nothing Mr. Wacky Sci-Fi does is going to stop that. "We intend to take steps to ensure that, General," Croesus said. He snapped his fingers, and a man on his right stepped out of the darkness. "This is Mr. Smith. He will go with you to this Port Charlotte place." "Charlotte, Port Charlotte," the general said. A low murmur echoed around the table. It was never wise to correct Croesus. "The name is unimportant," Croesus snapped. "He will go with you and then remain after you leave. He will watch this Mr. Mayhew and report directly to me as to his activities. If I judge them to be a threat to us, you will take care of him. Is my meaning clear?" Stefano nodded. "As crystal." Bright and early Monday morning, Daniel borrowed his father's pickup truck and headed down to Lemon Bay Marina. Backing up to the fence and around his shed, he parked and got out his keys. Once the gate was unlocked, he backed the truck up as close to the shed as he could. Dropping the back, he opened the door to the shed and got out his mock-up. Oh yeah, this was going to be great. Just wait until the board saw this. It took a bit of doing, but he got the scale model into the back, threw a tarp over it, and tied it down tight. After all, there was no sense taking any chances with his baby. Climbing back into the cab, he headed up to US 41, hung a right, and cruised through downtown Port Charlotte. Daniel had to smile. The traffic lights were so perfectly in sync that as long as he maintained the right speed, he could just cruise right through them. The community was a fairly nice area, if suffering a bit of urban sprawl. Daniel figured that was due to the land values. Around here, it was cheaper to go out rather than up. So the area had few high-rise buildings. The exceptions were the county administration building and the two main hospitals. All along US 41 were the usual things: strip malls, convenience stores, fast food restaurants, and chain businesses. The community had what could be called a lived-in look. While Daniel could never truly think of the place as home, he was used to the area and knew his way around, so it wasn't long before he was pulling into the parking lot of the county administration. He had to laugh. The place didn't have nearly enough parking spaces. Most people ended up parking on the grass. Interesting how the government was always good about exempting its projects from all the usual rules regarding parking. In fact, there weren't even any handicap parking spaces. Still, he was able to find an open area near the side of the tall brick building. From here, he could easily get to the county commissioner's conference room. The only problem was getting his stuff there. Fortunately, the path to the room was a wide and spacious hallway that cut straight through the building. He could see the parking lot out on the other side of the building. On both sides of the hall were glass walls that separated the various rooms from the outside. Right about midway down the hall on the left were the big double doors to the conference room. Its glass wall had thick curtains to shield it from prying eyes. Getting all of his things down there was going to be a bit of a challenge. Still, he had planned and was certain that he could manage. Climbing out of the truck, he rooted around in the back and pulled out the furniture dolly. It took a bit of doing, but he got his model on the dolly and started rolling it down the hallway. "Daniel," came a familiar voice. He turned and smiled to see that he was right. It was Kelly. "Hey there, what are you doing here today? Got a meeting or something?" "No, I'm here for your meeting." "What, didn't you know?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I wasn't told who was going to be at the meeting. The general is less than helpful when talking about attendees." "It's not a problem, is it?" "What, having you there?" "No, not at all. Actually, I think you'll love what I've come up with," Daniel said and patted his model. Kelly bent down a bit and grabbed the edge of the tarp. "Oh, can I have a preview, or do you want it to be a surprise?" Daniel smiled. "Well, I'd prefer if you wait." She straightened up and gave him a warm smile. "Sure, no problem." Daniel swallowed hard. Considering how late in fall it was suddenly very warm. He couldn't understand why that was. Maybe it was because they were in such a confined space. Yeah, that had to be it. Together, they guided the dolly down the hall and got the doors open. The conference room was a nice little space, large and round. Rows of folding chairs were just inside the doors, all facing the curved table where the county commissioners would normally sit. Today, the board would be sitting there. Fortunately, they weren't there yet, and Daniel had time to set up his things. "Anything I can do?" Kelly asked. "No, I got it," Daniel replied. "You go ahead and take a seat." Kelly did so, and Daniel maneuvered the model to sit right in front of the curved table. After that, he got out his laptop and plugged it into the conference room's closed-circuit television system. By then, the general and the other members had started filling in. The group was smaller than the last time Daniel had met with them, but he recognized all of the people. He greeted each of them by name and could see the general slowly shaking his head. Yeah, he never understood how Daniel was able to remember so many names. To be honest, neither did he. But hey, why argue with such a talent? Once everyone was seated, the general banged the gavel. "All right, everyone, this meeting of the National Science Board is called to order, and this is a special session. We can waive the reading of the minutes for the previous meeting and dispense with the usual rules of procedure. Daniel, the floor is yours." Daniel rose to his feet. "Thank you, General Lowe. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to unveil to you—" He whipped the tarp from the model. "The Sub-Zero Project." There, before them, was a scale model of a submarine in cutaway view. All over the sub was a series of tubing, much like the cooling coils from an air conditioning. Within the model was a large compressor and pipes connected to the coils. "Is this yet another liquid nitrogen dispersal system?" the general asked. Daniel shook his head as he pushed a button on his laptop and his PowerPoint presentation started. Each of their seats at the commissioner's table had a little monitor in front of them, so they had a great view of the presentation. A little animation demonstration of his plan appeared as he began to speak. "Not at all, General. What I now propose is a cooling system. We will use existing submarines and build a mesh-like frame on the outside of each of them. This will not take away from the fluid dynamics of the subs because the tubing will be attached to the hull and the shape of the tubing is round, so there will be very little impact to the maneuverability of the subs. A large compressor will have to be installed inside each sub, and it will be powered with electricity. Since all subs are nuclear, plenty of power is already available. The R410A gas, which is the Fruin only, a very eco-friendly gas, can be stored inside the tubing. so no additional storage tanks are needed except for maintenance. The condensers can be cooled down with water coolers, which is the same cooling system already used for the nuclear reactors. Now, the outside surface of the submarines will have hundreds of miles of copper tubing all around them, around 4 inches in diameter. Copper tubing will be used because it doesn't rust and is a great conductor for thermodynamic transfer. The tubing will be installed from front to back with only 2 inches of spacing between each length of tubing, so you can just imagine how much tubing each sub will have. It'll be like a fishing net covering the subs, except that the lines will only go horizontally. Now, once all the tubing is installed and the oversized generator running, the cold compressed Fruin is operational. So the outside of the subs can be made as cold as 30 degrees below zero at its highest output. Whoa, that's mighty cold, Daniel, General Lowe said. Won't the subs tend to ice over? Not at all, Daniel replied. After all, that's a maximum output, and the warm waters of the ocean will keep the lines from freezing at any given time. We don't have to push it that higher all the time. When the subs enter warm waters and navigate at approximately 20 nautical miles in a circular motion, the water they trawl through will drop in temperature. Now we will use 8 subs altogether and position them 5 miles apart until we're able to cover about a 40-mile diameter area. Why that distance? The general said. That's what the eye of a hurricane normally has. Daniel said. Having all 8 subs moving in a circular formation for a period of 12 hours will create a dramatic drop in water temperature, causing the storm to dissolve. Thus, this is how to stop a hurricane. Kelly smiled and slowly nodded. Very good, Daniel. So there's no release of the coolant into the ocean, right? Not at all, he said with a smile. The system is completely self-contained. All right, so the environmental aspect has been addressed, General Lowe said. Still, you're talking about taking subs out of service. No, General, that's not the case, Daniel replied. Just because we'll install copper tubing on the outside of the subs, there's no reason why the Navy can't still use them for their regular naval operations. The tubing will have minimal effect on the maneuvering of the subs or their weight, and the internal components will not require any significant retooling of the subs. Since the United States has more than 8 nuclear subs in service at any given time, they only need to be called on when needed, once a depression starts to develop. Miss Einstein nodded. Yes, very good. How in the world did you come up with this, Mr. Mayhew? It's truly brilliant. There followed about 2 hours of questions and answers, Daniel easily knocking down every objection General Lowe raised and responding to every inquiry of the other board members. Finally, it became very clear that he was winning them over. Now, people, the general said quickly. Let's not go off half-cooked here. This idea may hold some promise, but we are a long way from granting formal approval. The compressor and copper tubing idea came to me because I was looking for something that can run for hours and days just like an air conditioning unit, yet it does not pollute, Daniel said, ignoring the general. Kelly raised her hand. I move we approve this proposal for submittal to the full board. I second that, Mr. Durand said. Whoa, hold on, people, the general snapped, banging his gavel. You're both out of order. I beg to differ, General, Miss Einstein said. In accordance with Robert's rule of order, a motion has been properly made and seconded. Oh, screw Robert and his book, the general growled, practically spitting with every word. General, there's no need for such language, Kelly said. Now come on, let's have a show of hands on Daniel's proposal. Every member of the board, save General Lowe, voted in favour of Daniel's idea, and it therefore passed. Stefano looked as if he were about ready to spit nails, but he couldn't overturn the committee's decision. Very well, Daniel, he grumbled. We'll need a complete set of design specs ASAP, and then we'll pass them along to the full board. Daniel reached into his backpack and pulled out a stack of bound reports. Way ahead of you, General. Here you go, signed, sealed, and delivered. The general just kind of poked the stack and gave Daniel a curt nod. Oh, he did not look like a happy camper. But Daniel didn't care. He'd made it through the first step of the review process. Once the meeting had adjourned, the members of the board, again minus the general, congratulated Daniel on his invention, and several helped him to get his stuff back out to the truck. There they said their goodbyes, and soon it was once more Daniel and Kelly, face to face. An awkward silence followed. Why is it he could remember the name of every person he met, but could never think of some appropriate small talk to bring up with Kelly? So, how are things going? He finally managed to say. Kelly smiled. Oh, she had the most perfect teeth. Yet they were crooked. So why did he think they were perfect? That didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. Very good, Kelly said. Been working with Brendan on that lecture series I want to do about hurricanes. You remember that? Daniel bit his lip. Oh, yeah, right. I was going to help you with that, wasn't I? Sorry. Been busy and just... She laughed, and Daniel could swear he heard violins serenading them. Yes, as I can well attest to. Not to worry, Daniel. It's no big deal. But hey, maybe now that the project's been approved, you'll have time, huh? Sure, although I'd hardly say it's been approved. I mean, you know how government is. It's going to take time for it to even get to the testing phase. Hey, you've got to have faith, Daniel. I believe in you. Come on, you hungry? Let's go grab lunch. Oh yeah, I skipped breakfast this morning. Too nervous, and I didn't want to take a chance on puking in front of the board. Great, how about Chili's? Kelly said, pointing across US 41. Ah, you like that place? Daniel said. He was a little unsure about Gabby seeing Kelly. She was a good sister, but she was a little sister, and she did have a tendency to delight in embarrassing him in front of real or potential girlfriends. Sure, don't you? Kelly said. I could just about live on their awesome blossom. Daniel slowly nodded. Ah, yeah, sounds great. I'll see you there. Kelly's brow wrinkled. You're going to drive? Why don't we just walk? I would, but I'm not exactly parked legally here, plus I don't want to leave my stuff unattended. Kelly laughed. What, afraid of someone going to steal your model? That'd be tough. But I do see your point about the parking. Okay, see you over there. With that, Kelly turned and headed for the crosswalk. Daniel couldn't help but watch her go. While she dressed up for the meeting, she was not in a business suit, just jeans and a nice blouse. He rather liked the fact that the jeans didn't have back pockets. Somehow she looked so much better that way. Daniel blinked his eyes and looked away. No, this was not appropriate. He climbed into the truck, started it, and looked over his shoulder as he began to back up. Daniel, came a familiar and unfriendly voice. He turned and looked out his side window. Yeah, there was old General Sawpuss. General, something I can do for you? This isn't over, Daniel, he snapped. Actually, it is, Daniel shot back. And as I'm hungry, and I have a lunch date, I'll be leaving you. After you've looked over the technical specs, we can talk, okay? Before the General could blow up at him again, Daniel continued backing up. Oh, and there was Kelly, those jeans wiggling their way across US 41. What the hell? Just looking wasn't so bad. So long as he was discreet, he had to admit she certainly was fit. A few minutes later, he was parking across the street and caught sight of the General, still standing in the county admin parking lot. It looked like he was talking to someone, but Daniel couldn't be quite sure. Was he trying to get one of the board members to change their vote? Well, what did it matter? One vote wouldn't affect anything. No, Daniel wasn't going to worry about it. He was going to enjoy a pleasant lunch, and that was all. General Lowe flared his nostrils. He could just about feel his blood pressure rising. He'd have to do some yoga when he got home and spend some time with his wife. They always relaxed him. Turning to Mr. Smith, he looked him up and down. Yes, very good. You look every inch a typical tourist. Smith had shaved off his beard, and his lanky yet muscular frame was decked out in khaki shorts and a Disney t-shirt. The flip-flops, Killigan hat, and sunglasses were nice touches. Stefano reached into the breast pocket of his uniform, pulled out a thumb drive, and held it out to him. This everything? Smith asked. Every scrap of information we have on Daniel. As we say in the military, it's his full 201 file. I think the phrase today is the full skinny. Smith took it. Thank you. I'll digest it fully and then start. I expect weekly reports, Lowe said. Smith frowned. Those are not my orders. Croesus said. He's not here, Lowe snapped. By now he's winging his way home in his private jet. I'll be up in Tampa. Tampa is a whole lot closer than Qatar, my friend. So weekly reports, clear? Smith's jaw muscles clenched and relaxed. Very well, General. Lowe grinned. Good. He was going to keep control of the situation. Of course, there was still the matter of Daniel and his new idea. Drat, he'd actually come up with something that might work. Of course, it was a long way from conception to realization, and Stefano knew how government worked. Good ideas rarely made any headway. Plus, it helped that Daniel was a complete innocent when it came to dealing with the political structure. The General waved to his limo. Very good. I'll be off then. You have accommodations? Smith nodded. Yes, the Holiday Inn right down on Charlotte Harbour and a car. A hotel? Stefano said, as his limo pulled up next to them. It was felt that I should not try to purchase any property, Smith said. A car's one thing. Stefano nodded. Yes, I see the point. Very well. Good luck. They shook hands. Stefano climbed into his limo and they were off. No sooner were they on 41 that he was on his cell phone. He didn't trust this Smith character. He'd make sure that one of his men kept a close eye on him. In the meantime, he'd also see about dealing with Daniel on his own. Lunch was almost as bad as Daniel had expected. Gabby happened to be working today, so she wound up serving them. Naturally, she was full of questions about Kelly. Once she learned that Kelly and Daniel knew each other and were going to work on a weather show to teach kids about hurricanes, she was unstoppable. The questions spilled out of her, as did the information about Daniel's life. Some of it Daniel didn't mind, but what Gabby started going on about his childhood, that's where he drew the line. "Gabby, you weren't even born then," he said. "Stop talking about stuff you don't know anything about, okay?" Gabby and Kelly giggled. "Why, big bro, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were embarrassed. Gee, it was just a little dam across a drainage pipe." "Really, is that what they did?" Kelly asked. Gabriella nodded. "Yeah, and his friends wanted a pool to float their boats in, so they didn't see anything wrong with damming up the pipe. But if water was coming out of it, it must have been draining somewhere. Yeah, but they were a bunch of 7 and 8-year-old boys. What did they know? They built it, the water rose, and every backyard for a block flooded," Gabriella said. "I bet they got in big trouble," Kelly said. "Not really. The neighbours complained to the town constable, but they didn't know who had done it. So he just knocked the rocks and sticks away, and that was that. I always suspected that's where Daniel got his love of engineering." Again the girls laughed, and Daniel could feel his face getting warm. He hoped he wasn't blushing too badly. Oh, he suddenly wished he were facing the general once more. An anal military man he could handle. A smart-mouthed little sister. That was tough. "So, Gabby, is it okay for me to call you that?" Kelly said. She nodded. "Sure, I'm fine with that." "Great. Anyway, this brother of yours promised to help me with my weather show, and he never followed through. Is that normal for him, to go back on his promises?" Kelly said, a big smirk on her face. Daniel rolled his eyes and opened his mouth, but Gabby cut him off. "What, Daniel? Kelly, this man could forget his pants if he didn't need a place to put his keys." "Hey," Daniel snapped. Gabby laughed. "Oh, I'm just kidding, big brother. You know I love you." "Yeah, I must love you," he replied. "Only someone who truly loved you could put up with the crap you throw at them." He reached out and gave her a playful smack to the behind. Gabby gave a little squeak and stepped farther away from the table. "Daniel, don't do that here," Gabby said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If the manager sees you, you could get into trouble. It's one thing to be playful at home, but not out in public." Daniel sighed. "Good grief, what a world we live in when a brother can't roughhouse with his own sister. Okay, I'll be good." "Good man," Kelly said. "Now about my show, what do you say we get together over the weekend and discuss it? I've got a whole outline prepared, but I'm not the best at presentation." "You should try for the next show at the theatre department," Gabriella suggested. "What, me, on stage?" Kelly said, her jaw dropping. It took her a moment to recover. She blinked and shook her head. "No, I don't think so." "I agree," Daniel said. "The acting stuff is not for me either." Gabriella snorted. "Oh, you two are such wimps. I'm not saying you try out for the lead, but a minor role would give you some good stage experience, boost your confidence when talking to a crowd." Kelly slowly nodded. "Huh, now that's not a bad idea." "Well, count me out," Daniel said. "As for the weather show, yeah, I'll help you, Kelly. You want to come over this Saturday?" Kelly gave him a thumbs up. "You got it." That Saturday, Daniel managed to straighten up the house a bit. His dad's sloppiness was just about worthy of Oscar Madison. He only hoped that didn't make him a Felix Unger. Still, he was glad that his dad seemed to be cutting down on the drinking. He only wished he could convince his dad to toss some of his old newspapers, but it was always the same old thing. He hadn't finished reading them yet. Of course he had. He just didn't remember. And when Daniel would look at the headlines on the papers and see things like Obama projected to win Florida, it seemed to him that that was old news. So Daniel had to be sneaky about how he got rid of the old newspapers and magazines. He enlisted the help of Gabby and Tony on occasion, and they would smuggle things out of the house. Merely putting them out in the trash wasn't good enough. Pop would go through the cans and retrieve anything he thought worthy of keeping. Daniel also learned that he couldn't just take the top items off the piles around the house. Pop would notice that. No, he had to lift the piles up, remove the bottom items, and then put the piles back in place. It was proving to be more effective in at least keeping the clutter at bay. "Daniel," Alex called from the master bedroom. "Can you help me with something?" "Sure, Pop. Be right there." Daniel put down the newspapers he was straightening up and headed into the bedroom. This was still the one unassailed area of the house. Daniel almost felt as if he had to hold his nose when he came in here. The sheets on the king-size bed were practically black with filth, and one whole side of it was a mass of newspapers, magazines, and TV dinner trays. The room could be quite nice if it were only kept up. Just inside the door on the right was a big, beautiful dresser and mirror. The bed was against the opposite wall, and to the left of that was Pop's little sitting area. Behind that was the master bath, and that was the one place that Daniel would not go without a Hamzat suit. Heaven knows what sort of new life forms were evolving in that room, and Daniel didn't want to know. The little sitting area was where Alex was now, seated at his little modular computer desk, the one that Gabby had gotten him at IKEA, and still thankfully his eyes did not have that glazed overlook. "Ah, there you are, son. Have you seen the checking account statements from the last 2 months?" Alex said. "I can't find them anywhere." "Pop, that doesn't mean much," Daniel replied. "I mean, come on, look at your desk." He was right. The little unit was a mass of papers. It was amazing that the keyboard of his old computer could even be seen. The desk had a bunch of cubby holes and shelves all empty, and things were piled on the monitor and mousepad. Yes, I know I need to set things right, but I usually at least see them come in the mail, Alex said. I don't remember seeing them, did you? Ding dong. The front doorbell rang. Hold that thought, Pop. I'm sure they're around here somewhere. We just need to sift through things. Alex practically threw himself over his desk in a protective maneuver. No, you'll mess it all up. Daniel rolled his eyes. Yeah, right, Pop. Then you'll never find anything. Please, Pop. Let me get the door and we'll talk about this later. Okay, you go. I'll find them myself. With that, Daniel headed back to the living room and crossed to the door and threw it open with a big grin on his face. Hey there. Good to see her. Huh? Daniel said, his face falling. Tony stood there, decked out for the beach, Roscoe in his arms. Gee, Daniel, why the long face? Oh, sorry, I was just expecting someone else. The class outline right? Tony nodded and headed inside as Daniel gestured for him to come in. You got it. Is this not a good time? Not at all. I'm just expecting Kelly to come by. We're going to... Kelly, that wonderful weather girl? Woman, came Kelly's voice. Daniel turned. There was Kelly just getting out of her car in the driveway. Hey, Kelly, great timing, Daniel said. She smiled, turned and grabbed something in her car. Oh, such a nice view. Daniel had to smile, as it was the weekend. She'd gone with casual clothes, simple t-shirt and snug little shorts. Turning back around, she held up her backpack. Got all my stuff right here, she said. So, Tony, you come to help? In a roundabout fashion, Daniel said. He and I are finishing up the outline for my class, so I figured we could kind of merge the two subjects and see what sort of crossover materials we can use. Kelly nodded. As she walked to the front door. Good idea. Bring your bathing suit, Kelly? Tony said. Daniel's got a pool. Actually, I do have it on under my clothes, but not because I knew about his pool. I was going to hit the beach later. This late in the year? Tony said, his voice going up in pitch. He was obviously surprised at Kelly's statement. She laughed. Not all of us are thin-blooded Floridians, Tony. You tell him, Kelly, Daniel said with a grin. Come on, guys, let's sit out on the lanai. Lead the way, fearless leader, Tony said. Daniel did so, and they paused at the doorway to Alex's bedroom to give him a wave and a greeting. He returned it, and then they headed out onto the lanai. The yard looked pretty good now. Daniel had mowed the grass and given the orange trees all a dose of fertilizer. The aroma of sweet oranges was quite strong and got Daniel's mouth to watering every time he smelled it. He'd planned ahead. There was a pitcher of iced tea on the glass-top table and some snacks. No sooner had they taken their seats than Alex was out to check on them. He always wanted to know about Daniel's friends, so they gave him a quick rundown of the class and show that Daniel would be working on. I hope you're not biting off more than you can chew, Alex told Daniel. Don't you worry, Mr. Mayhew, Tony said brightly. With Kelly and me on his side, he'll do great. As Alex shrugged and went back inside, Daniel had to wonder, was his father right? Between these two and the Sub-Zero project, could he handle it all?